You're all set.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Kim, do you know if either Carmela or Jim are planning to join us today?
I'm sorry, I don't know about Carmela. I didn't get a chance to talk to her all day. I do know Jim said he was going to plan on talking because I said if I was or being here, but I don't know where he is. I just came in from work, so.
Okay, that's fine. I saw that both of our speakers had signed in, but now I only see one of them. But we might as well get going. Let's see. All right, we will call to order the Planning Committee of the Troy City Council at 6:03 p.m. on September 27th. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Steele, could you lead us actually?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wonderful. Now for the roll call. We've got Councilmember Ash McPherson.
Present.
Councilmember Steele.
Present.
We also have with us Councilmembers McDermott and Zalewski, as well as Planning Commissioner Steve Strickman. I guess I don't actually know. James, what is your, is it Assistant Planner, James Rath? And City Engineer, Aaron Vera. Thank you all for joining us. And we will start off with the public comment. We have one member of the public who's with us right now, Josh Morrison. I guess just for reference, there's two items on the agenda. We've got an overview of the city parks plan, which the planning department has been working on this year, Bradley. And so we'll go over that, and then we'll also have some discussion of the Sperry parcel and two resolutions, or resolution and an ordinance related to that. So if folks can comment on either of those items, either our parks or the Sperry parcel, you're welcome to talk. And Josh, I'm going to go ahead and promote you to a panelist.
He wanted to speak. He just asserted that he didn't want to join the public forum.
Oh, sorry?
He did not indicate that he wanted to join the forum. If you check
okay.
the list, it was the other person who wanted to speak.
Gotcha. Well, Josh, if you change your mind and you don't want to speak, feel free to raise your hand. But in the meantime, we will move forward with our agenda. And if Bonnie joins us again, we'll hear from her. I hope everyone got the letter from her about the importance of the dog park in Troy. And making sure that that is part of our parks plan. So hopefully we can get an update on that as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. Oh, we've got, I think this is Bonnie on the line. Double check. I can't check on my, can anyone check the email from Bonnie? It was the phone number ending in 97. Is that correct? If so, Bonnie, we'll go ahead and put you on in a minute to speak.
That is correct, Anasha, 9797, yep.
Yes.
Great. So Bonnie, I'm going to allow you to talk, and you can you have 5 minutes to address the council. Hey, Bonnie. Okay, Bonnie, we aren't able to hear you right now. Just double check that your phone isn't muted. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, Bonnie. It doesn't seem to be working.
Looks like Josh has their hand raised now.
That's true.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Jim. Let the record reflect, Councilmember Gully has joined us, and we're trying to hear from Bonnie, who emailed us about the dog park earlier this week. Did everyone get a chance to read her email letter?
Yes.
Great. Bonnie, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. It looks like something's wrong in the tech here, so we're not able to hear you. We're gonna go ahead and move on to Josh.
Hey, Anasha?
Yeah.
If you want, I can have her call my phone and then put it on speaker and throw it, see if we could go. do it
Yeah.
that way.
That sounds good. Will you, actually, maybe you could just call her right now? You have
Okay.
her number, right?
Yep. Hang on.
All right. I'm gonna move on to Josh for now, and then we'll connect Bonnie when she's ready. Oh, Josh has lowered his hand, so. Oh. Hey, Josh,
Hi, can you hear me?
we can.
Are these items on the consent agenda or not on the consent agenda?
There's no consent agenda. Just discussing too.
Okay, I didn't sign up for a public comment. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. I just was tipping my hat, showing vested interest in inland waterways, and I understand that the undeveloped area around the Sperry Ironworks is all the zoning and everything like that. I'm just showing vested interest in the area and forward thinking about net zero and sustainability. So there, thank you guys.
Yeah, great. Good to hear. Feel free to stay on the line. That is the second thing we're going to discuss today. So we'll be discussing the parks
No problem at all. No problem at all.
probably about an hour first, and then we'll move on to that. So thanks for being here. Okay, Ken.
Yep. Anasha, I do have Bonnie on my phone, so let's see if this will work. All right.
Hi.
Hey, Bonnie.
Hi, everybody.
Can you hear her?
We can.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Okay, go ahead, Bonnie.
Okay, well, I just wanted to inspire everyone to put some of the money that you have in reserve towards a dog park, because it seems to me that Troy, downtown especially, is full of dogs and they have no place to run or socialize. And it seems to be a great omission in downtown Troy. I personally don't have a dog. I'm not allowed to where I live. but I work as a pet sitter and I walk dogs a lot. And, you know, it's one thing to walk a dog, but they need to run and they need to be off lead. And it would also really help, I think, the community bond together, because I found that people who have dogs love to talk to other people who have dogs. You know, I go up to a lot of people. I live right in Monument Square, and it's a very social area. And for instance, last Saturday was a beautiful day, and there were so many people out walking their dogs. And I went up to a lot of them and asked if I could pet their dogs and then engage them in conversation. And everyone I spoke to was in hearty agreement with the dog park. And I actually got some names and email addresses of a few people who said they would serve on, if it's going to be called Friends of the Dog Park or whatever the committee name would be, but they would be willing to do that. Now, at the time, I wasn't sure what that would involve. And Anasha told me that it would be more than just trying to promote the park, but after the park was ideally established, maintaining it. And I think there are people that would certainly be willing to do that, because dog lovers are a great group of people, and they're very heartily attached to their animals. And I think that this would be just a super idea for Troy. It's kind of surprising that there isn't one in downtown already. I was made aware that there were, I think, 2 other dog parks, like farther out. But for whatever series of reasons, they hadn't been very successful. But one in Prospect Park, I think, would be extremely successful, because I walk there a lot. I walk dogs there, and I walk by myself. And it seems to be a really underutilized recreational facility. I mean, there just aren't that many people there. And there's so much greenery and space, and it's so beautiful and peaceful that it would be a perfect spot for a dog park to be located. So I'm not real familiar with local government. I've never done this before, but I certainly would put all my efforts towards trying to encourage people to approve this and get people to support it as well. And so whatever role I can play, I'd really be happy to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bonnie. And we will certainly make sure that's part of the discussion. Here, are you able to listen to us on your Zoom phone with Zoom on the phone?
Yeah.
Great. And we're also broadcasting to YouTube, so you can feel free to listen to it later if you're busy tonight. But we will make sure to get some.
I was able to see you guys initially, but then it kind of went away. I don't know. Technology is beyond me, but this is working very well, so I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for being here. And we will move on to the main portion of the agenda. And,
Okay, so Anasha, I'm going to mute and I'll disconnect with Bonnie.
Okay.
All right.
Great. And I guess for the first part of this agenda, which is a presentation of the parks plan, I don't know who wants to lead that. Is that James or Steve, or who should I turn it over to? Directly to James?
Yep.
Great. Thanks for being here, James.
And I'm going to jump in front of you, James, and just say that James has been with us for 3 years, has done a great job in land use planning. He's been working with Aaron and with Clough Harbors with weekly meetings, planning this presentation you're about to have, planning for the parks, and speaking with neighbors and involved people who live around the park. So there's been a lot of outreach on this, a lot of input. And with that, I'm just going to hand it off to James, and I'm technologically challenged tonight with battery power, so I'm going to turn off my picture.
Okay.
Steve. Yeah, as Steve said, well, separately from what Steve said, I mean, you all are familiar with the $2 million that have been set aside for park spending. So I was generally tasked with looking at our park system comprehensively. We took 10% of that money, or really 5% of that money, I believe it ended up being, and we use that to really thoughtfully plan out what improvements our parks actually needed. And we looked at parks citywide. We didn't look at every single small park, and we did not look at Freer Park because Freer is a bit of its own animal with the golf course and everything else that's happening there. It has its own plans that we're moving forward on, but we touched most of the other parks, and we did spread it out throughout the city. Every district, we've highlighted opportunities to improve. And so really what we're looking at now in terms of a product is this citywide parks master plan. And we also created a standards manual. So, if someone is deciding to add an amenity or something as simple as a bench or a trash can in the future, they can go into the manual, they can see the exact matching bench or trash can that the city uses, and we can have a comprehensive, cohesive park system that is familiar to everybody. Right now, you go around to our parks and things might not match depending on who was there at that time or which administration or which council. Things have been done differently, and this does not create a consistent feeling amongst people who are coming into the city, especially those who are not as familiar with the parks and where amenities are. So yeah, with that, I guess I'll jump. What I'd like to do is jump into the concepts. I would like to do this fairly briefly, just because it is really, it could spill over and take up a lot of time. And then if you have questions afterwards, that would be great. Also, I won't go into the standards manual, but you all will be able to see that once the consultant firm that we've worked with, CHA, has sent us back their updated edits. I did send back quite a few requests for them to update that document. And then I'll go through basically what we've earmarked at, or how we think that $2 million should be spent. You'll see all of the different needs and wants that we have for our park system. We have some really amazing parks and some great amenities and attractive places, but there are obvious needs. We really do need to revamp some of these places. Some of the parks need a simple facelift. Others really do need to be redone in a little bit more of a comprehensive way. So I'll go through the concepts, and then I'll show you what we're thinking for the how to spend that initial $2 million. And then it would be great to have some feedback and some questions from you all. Okay.
Sounds good. Are you able to share your screen?
Yes. Just give me 1 second here.
Great.
Are you all seeing this Prospect Park?
We are.
Okay. Okay, so these are the concept plans that CHA has put together. So I basically worked with them to go through the existing conditions. We created a brief vision for each space, and then highlighted different tangible items for scope that they were tasked with creating or tackling. So these are the ones that I won't go through in detail. It would just take way too much time, but you all will be able to go through this later on. So starting with Prospect Park, and just get the scaling right for Zoom. Okay, it's a little bit easier. I think I can get rid of this on the side. Okay, so for Prospect Park, obviously one of our larger parks, you can see the arrows here do point out our disc golf course. It's fairly new. The yellow down here is the tennis courts. You all can't see my cursor, correct?
Yeah, we can see your cursor moving around.
Oh, great. And the pool down here on the bottom, just to orient ourselves. So for Prospect, what we really wanted to focus on was the playground equipment. We identified a need for an amphitheater or a small event space. We wanted to address the vehicle traffic and how vehicles have been going onto the lawns and damaging the park space in the past. And with that, we wanted to kind of make sure the circulation worked, not only for the people who are walking or driving in, but also our maintenance vehicles, and so that those folks can get around the park easily. And then we talked a little bit about the needs of the tennis courts and other like sports facilities like that. So you can see the legend on the bottom right that points out a little bit more of where things are. And then up here on the top right, this is a standard detail of how we would address some of those vehicle routes. So we would remove some of the excess asphalt. That could be repurposed for anything as simple as just lawn, or it could be, you could plant a tree there or do something else with that space. And then we would have some bollards that would likely collapse down so that maintenance vehicles could get by. We also wanted to remove a good section or pretty much all of that guardrail that goes around the park. This poses an access issue for folks who can't step over it, or for young children who can't fit under it. And instead, we'd like to do something like boulders or something more decorative that fits the park's aesthetic a little bit. Those barriers make it feel like you can actually speed around and you don't have to worry about it as much. They also don't look very nice, aside from the obvious access issues. So the little purple dots you see, those are places that we would have this sort of trailhead treatment. The boulders would be kind of sprinkled around about every 6 feet or so that you wouldn't be able to drive on there. And then the playground area right here would stay in the same location, but we've changed that layout a bit. And then this orange circle is that amphitheater. Sorry for jumping around a little bit there. I'm just going to keep moving through here. The other main thing that we wanted to address with Prospect Park was a new access point closer to downtown. So we know that obviously most of our downtown is the most densely populated area, and we also don't really have a real true pastoral or open space where people can, play or go for a run. We have Riverfront Park, which is very different, and then we have some smaller areas like Sage and Barker Park. But for folks to get into Prospect Park now, they have to walk all the way up around on Congress and Ferry and go around. It's quite a distance, and obviously the grade is challenging. So we wanted to reutilize some of the old roads that were there back in the day and create a walking path. And this would spit you out right over just east of 6th. There's also this existing trail now, which is a little overgrown. Some folks are afraid to go back there. We've had people who have lived in the woods or camped out there. And so the more that we encourage positive uses, active uses, people who are going to be going there more often, the more that we can discourage people from using these spaces in improper ways. And that goes throughout the park system. That's not just this park at Prospect. So we've highlighted the trail on the western side here that would connect down to Haverman's, and it goes out over here on Ferry. That would really just be cleaning that up, making it look more official, doing some trailhead signs, stuff like that. And then the trail that you see on the right of your screen that meanders a bit through the woods, that would need some, minor grading, maybe some points that we have to address, some flooding areas. So you'd have to maybe build some raised walkways, stuff like that, and then just gravel throughout most of it. The next park that we'll go through is Knickerbocker. Again, I'm not going to go through the document, or the written document, but obviously just a bird's eye view of the park to kind of orient ourselves again. Down here on the bottom, we have the existing track. And one of the main things with the Knickerbocker Park was we wanted to create more places for people to play more organized sports. So we heard a lot from the community, especially up in Lansingburg, that they needed a place to play youth sports like Pop Warner football, basketball, things like that. And they didn't really have a concrete home. They've kind of been bounced around these different leagues. The city obviously understands the value that these leagues bring to our youth. And so instead of kind of squeezing them into some of the smaller spaces and just barely being able to make it work, and then that kind of feel consuming an entire smaller park, we decided to kind of double down on this sports complex sort of idea that exists already in the Nick. And we found that within the existing track, you can almost fit a football field. We also found that the existing track is wider than any official track really needs to be. So you could, ooh, oh no, what's just happened to my Adobe? Bear with me for 1 second. My Adobe just quit on me. Let's see if I can. Sorry, folks. See if I could just open it again. Oh, all right. That was weird. Didn't quit. We found that the track is actually wider than any official track. So it's wider than a high school track would need to be. You can have a standard, and we're not actually using it for standard like track meets or anything like that. So what we highlighted as an opportunity to fit that field in there is we would actually trim out some of that inner edge of the track, and that would allow us to fit in a full-size football field and give a Pop Warner Football League a home. The field obviously could be used for lacrosse or soccer or other things like that as well. In this yellow square, you'll see if you look at the legend, you can see a new playground. That playground, from what I understand, has actually already been installed. This black polygon here is a new expanded parking area. We understand that bringing folks in from other communities to play organized sports, also with the anticipated installation of a new pool, we might have higher traffic in the park. So we'd like to accommodate that with a new parking area. That parking area would circulate people a little bit better. They'd be able to kind of go in a loop and do drop-offs at different locations as needed. And then we have the pool here in blue. I should point out that a lot of these improvements within the Nick will be done separately from this $2 million parks project. The pool is totally a separate project, as well as the parking lot. So just to manage everyone's expectations for this $2 million, we're really focusing in on stuff like the field. Another key component that we'd like to do here in Knickerbocker Park is add a trail connection to the existing Uncle Sam Trail or the Troy Rail Trail, which is going right here on the right side of the screen. It's not really highlighted, but you can see the trail connection that comes down. A split rail fence or 3-rail fence was just installed there, I believe, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to deter ATVs from going in between the park and the trail. We'd like to maintain that fencing. We'd also like to do some fencing along this small trail or trail connection. But we do want to create a new opening so that folks who aren't using an ATV can still get through between the trail and the park. I imagine, I don't live up in that area, but I imagine it's a very popular walking route for folks to go from the park onto the trail and vice versa. Whenever I'm over there, I do see a lot of folks walking their dog. So similarly to, was it Bonnie or the earlier caller was expressing need for dog parks. We did highlight an opportunity for a small dog park here on the bottom. So folks would be able to go along the rail trail from either direction, come down this new walking connection and go into a small dog park where they would have a space for the dog to run around, and they wouldn't need to let their dog out, throughout the rest of the park where it might not be as safe. I've seen other folks letting their dogs into like the softball fields when they're not in use. And while that might not be an issue most of the time, we know that those fields are often in use. This southmost softball field you can see is a different color. That's just an edit that we had to make afterwards. We didn't get it in time from CHA. So those 3 fields will remain, as well as the main baseball field and the soccer field that exists in the middle of the park. We talked a lot about the comprehensive plan and the different roadway concepts that the comprehensive plan had identified. Right now, it doesn't seem like the city really has interest or the capability to pursue, adding private development onto the park like it's identified in that comprehensive plan. We've talked closely with the Knickerbocker Park Association and what kind of ideas they had for the space. And so we decided to not include that new roadway that would add a lot of costs and maintenance to the city side. And what we wanted to do instead was just to kind of increase the the prominence of the alleyway that exists right here. So you'll see this blue line here. We want to make that, it doesn't actually need to be widened in most places, but we do want to make it safer and more welcoming. So we want to add a sidewalk on the side and just make it a little bit more inviting and it look more like a street rather than a dark, kind of back alley sort of feel. Because right now, if you're on this edge of Knickerbocker Lane, you can kind of tell there's a park there, especially if you're familiar with the community, but you can't really tell how to get in. So we'd like to kind of clear that out. We also want to remove a lot of the brush so that it feels open and welcoming. Folks can see it, they can walk into there, but we're not really adding any vehicle access on this side. So if you're driving to the park, if you're staying for a while and you need to drive there, you would take 104th and go up into the lot as you would today. Or excuse me, I don't think it's 104th. I think it's 103rd. Yes. The access would be maintained on 103rd down below, just off the map, and you'd go up as normal. But we did want to create these pedestrian connections that you'll see in purple. So you'd be able to walk in from 7th Ave, where it dead ends. There would be new, smaller scale fencing. So likely 4-foot black chain link fencing, much more welcoming than the 10 or 12 foot or 16 foot or whatever is there now at 7th Ave, which is very oppressive or kind of deterring, and make it feel like it is actually a part of the community. We want to do similar things at 105th and 106th and at 107th. Right now at 107th, you have to walk kind of through the school's property and then get to this section here. We want to make it feel, again, like it's more part of the community and get people in and out of the park so that they can use it and enjoy it. We did highlight the existing tennis courts here that are in a little bit of disrepair. We would like to make 2 of them basketball courts and 2 of them tennis courts, because one of the basketball courts would be displaced from the pool's location as well. Okay, that's a lot for the Nick, but I do think I covered all of it, so I'm gonna move on. And then right next door, I already mentioned some of the ideas around the Troy Rail Trail. You can see 2 photos here, just to, again, kind of be thinking of what that space is and how it functions. Again, we're calling the Troy Rail Trail what was called the Uncle Sam or the Uncle Sam Bike Trail. We do plan on renaming it the Troy Rail Trail to kind of pay homage to its history as a railroad. I think it was the Boston and Delaware Railroad off the top of my head, but it does have it's very loosely associated with Uncle Sam. I mean, really the only thing that I've been able to dig up is that his grave is nearby. So we also have another trail called the Uncle Sam Downtown, which is a history walk that folks do. And we have had calls into the planning department with people confused by having 2 trails named the Uncle Sam. So the idea is, again, to change this to the Troy Rail Trail. So you will see it as the Troy Rail Trail on here. I only have 3 different access points on here. We would like to add a couple concepts in together so that it would look the same at each different entrance, which would include Ingalls, Gurley, Cemetery, and Northern at least. But here you can see a new connection at Ives Court. We've been talking to the landowner here whose property has this awkward shape that these 2 landowners on either side of the cul-de-sac, their land touches at the end of the street, which is very abnormal for Troy. Usually that's, continued right of way. They've had issues with folks going onto their property to access the trail, and they don't own a lot of the property along the trail over here. So we've been talking about a land swap or a lot line adjustment, which seems mutually beneficial. So they've been on board with this so far, and we're working on that as an opportunity. So what you're looking at here is a switchback entrance at Ives Court. This would bring a legal, appropriate, inviting entrance to a whole new section of Lansingburg. Right now, if you live in this community, you either have to trespass across someone's property, or you have to go and walk all the way around on Northern Drive, where there's no sidewalk, there's no bike lane, there's no real safe way to get up there. So the trail then loses, a whole audience. And then I'll just show the next one as well, because they're quite similar. So here's Winnie Ave with Garden Court on the left and Glen Ave on the right. So over on Glen Ave, we're doing the same thing as we are on Ives Court. These are ADA compliant switchbacks. You know, you'd go into one section and you go back and forth to tackle that grade. It makes it much more accessible. Somebody in a wheelchair can use this facility. It's wide enough and the grade is appropriate. And then we've had the light dotted line, or the smaller dotted line, is fencing as well. So we'd like to include fencing all along this section to, again, deter that ATV use. You know, a savvy dirt bike rider will be able to get through anything that somebody in a wheelchair or somebody pushing a stroller will be able to get through. So unfortunately, we can't do anything that would completely block them off, but this is meant to really deter them from, you know, being able to shoot through these spaces quickly, but also making it warm and inviting to other folks. On the left over at Garden Court, because we do have our ADA entrance on Glen, on Garden, we're just proposing a maintenance entrance. So there would be either bollards that you could knock down and put back up, or there would be a utility gate, and we would narrow it down with some striping to, again, make it feel a little bit tighter. There would be a pedestrian opening there, so you could walk through there if you'd like to, if that's more convenient for you at Garden, but it won't be ADA compliant necessarily. And then along here, the little line with the X marks, that's actually where we'd like to reuse some of what it's called W beam here, which is guardrail. That's from Prospect Park. We thought that would be a good way to save some cost, and you know, it, again, would prevent ATVs from going up this hill and getting onto the trail there. Okay, 112th Street Park. This bird's eye view satellite image is a good example of how some of our parks don't really have that existing layout. You know, that feeling that you know exactly what that park space is meant for, designed for. So what we'd like to do is kind of create that feeling. You know, give people still places to go and play and do whatever they want to do. You know, flexibility, but kind of curate it a little bit more so that, you know, there are some clear amenities there for them to enjoy. We have two concepts for 112th Street Park. I know there's going to be you know, different reasons folks might like certain concepts and maybe things that we missed in both of them. So again, at the end, it'd be great to get some feedback and maybe hear which ones kind of speak to folks more. They are fairly similar though, so I'll just briefly show concept one, and then I'll go through concept two in a little bit more detail. So here's concept one, and then just to go through concept two. Okay, so what you're seeing here, the existing basketball courts here on the south side. Here's 112th Street on the bottom and 113th Street on top. You can see the sidewalk that goes around the Boys and Girls Club. Again, just to orient folks, what we're showing is with the dotted lines are new pathways that would go through the park. So right now there's the existing or the old softball or baseball field. I know it's not really in use anymore. Jim and I got to meet here and he got to tell me a little bit about the space and how it functions. Stories about breaking windows with his home run hits and stuff like that. So we know that there has been some conflict with the baseball use and the neighbors there. So we know that baseball isn't necessarily the most feasible use here. And again, we're kind of trying to encourage those uses over at the Nick. So what we've kind of created is a little bit more of a common space. The orange space that you see on the left is just open free play. So, you know, kids want to bring a soccer ball or football and play on their own. The green space would actually look very similar, but it would likely just function more in a more pastoral or contemplative way. It would be a space you'd probably want to have a picnic. You know, maybe we would do some grills there, stuff like that. And then this zone on the right along East Park Place, that's a bit more busy. We've highlighted the space for a splash pad. We have a new building with restrooms, which is required for the splash pad. We've got the yellow space as a playground, and then the blue space is just a little pavilion. We knew that from speaking with the Boys and Girls Club that they wanted the playground closer to them, which is right now in this bottom left square. And, you know, they have to walk a little bit further and they're not as comfortable doing that. And it's really close to the basketball courts where, there's often people getting into an intense game of basketball, and not really the best place for a 3-year-old to be learning how to use the jungle gym at the same time. So we've kind of separated those a little bit. We've also added some seating by the basketball court. So when they're having bigger games where parents want to come out, they have a place to sit and watch. And then we've added this landscaping area to kind of buffer those spaces. So these are small scale plants, maybe they would be 2 or 3 feet tall, low maintenance, but you would still be able to see across the park. It would just not be a place that you'd necessarily want to walk right directly through. The bottom right area, we know that there have been some issues with folks loitering there, maybe bringing alcohol into the park, things like that. We want to clear that space up a little bit. There's some kind of beat up pine trees that are there right now. So we want to clear those out, create a warm, welcoming entranceway so you can kind of walk through the space. One thing that I really like about these concepts is that it creates multiple uses for the park. So right now, if you live in the area and you want to go for a run, or you want to walk your dog, or maybe take your kids out in the stroller, you probably aren't going to 112th Street Park. There's really nothing there for you. There's no way to get through it. This totally changes that. So this creates a real destination for folks that want to spend a lot of time, but it also is just a route for people who are passing through. So if you want to, take your dog on that walk, now you have a great new route to cut through. And then we just have this, we have the routes that go different ways, but I like the route that goes northeast because Snowman Ice Cream is right here. We know a lot of folks are going there. So it kind of plays well with that sort of thing. People who buy something there, they have a new place to then go sit and hang out. Okay, if Bonnie's still on the call, I think, well, hopefully she'll be happy. This is our dog park concept. We've spoken a lot about dog parks in the past 3 years or so, or at least I have. I've met with different groups who have been interested in the dog park, and then we worked on this whole concept plan. The primary location that we highlighted with that group was off of Hale Street, which is just on the other side of Prospect. That area just needs tons of work. The site, grading and other site preparations that we need to do at that site would add a lot of cost. And then we haven't really addressed a whole lot of the access issues. If you have a car, you can put your dog in the back of the car and drive to a park in Colony or in Albany. We weren't necessarily filling a big void there. We wanted a space that people could walk to really easily. And we know from hearing from folks like Bonnie that downtown, there are tons of dogs and people can't really get to a place to let them off leash safely. So this park is, this dog park is right in the green space next to Kennedy Towers. So this is city-owned land, currently maintained through THA, and I have already met with THA and spoke to them about the concept. I was all prepared to really convince them as why this was a great idea and that they should support it. And it was the easiest meeting I've had in my time with the city. They were really, really supportive. They were like, oh, we don't even allow dogs at Kennedy Towers now, but I guess we can change that. They really loved the idea, and I really appreciate that, of course. So we're showing this green polygon as the dog park area. The black dotted line going around it is a fence that would be adequate to keep the dogs in. So maybe something a little bit higher, like 6 foot. Black chain link again. We do the double gates, or sometimes referred to as airlock gates. So you'd have to go into one gate, you close it behind you, then you go into the next one so that you get into the space and somebody else's dog can't run out as you're entering. Fairly standard stuff if you've been to a dog park. We also want to do this, you can see this green line on the left along 6th. We'd like to do some landscaping to buffer from that heavier traffic. But this is really intended to be a space that people walk to from downtown. THA was open to working on some sort of parking agreement for the circular parking area that they have on the north side of the park. But again, we want to encourage people from downtown to be walking there. And this area will get worked on throughout the Federal Street Corridor linkage study. So we'll be looking at traffic safety changes through that study. You'll see as we go through the budget that this is really a ready-made space for a dog park. We're really talking about fencing. We could go and add other amenities like water or places for the dogs to like jump on and stuff like that. But we kept it really simple, you know, fencing the airlock gates and then like a maintenance entrance. The next park is Canal Ave, which is on 3rd and Canal, just south of the posting kill. This park is quite small, and right now it has this awkward layout where it tends to feel really full, even if just 1 or 2 people are in the park. There's only one entrance. It's right over here right across from the fire station, the Osgood Firehouse, which is right here. And the fencing is like 6 or 7 feet. And so it's fairly like prison-like or kind of oppressive. It doesn't really feel welcoming. The space is kind of dark. There's some overgrown trees. So we wanted to kind of totally redo this space. We wanted to open it up. We actually want to remove one of the trees in the front so that you can see in and out of the park more easily. And we wanted to change the ways that you could go in and out of the park. You'll see the little purple dots on the corners here. We also wanted to spill out onto Canal Ave. You know, in talking to Aaron, we have 150 miles of streets. We don't need all of them. Some of them get used infrequently, and Canal Ave is one of those spaces. It's also right along the posting kill where we know people like to go fishing. They like to stop and look at the water and interact with that space. And right now the fencing there is inadequate. It's not necessarily in the best shape. So we wanted to add appropriate fencing over here and you know, allow for spaces that people could look out and enjoy the water or fish or whatever they might want to do. We also highlighted an area for a future splash pad. And then the yellow areas here are for playgrounds. And just briefly, we do know that the fire station is not using Canal Ave for fire response. So just before, if anyone's wondering on that front. Okay, Beeman Park. Beeman has a really great feeling already, one of our nicest laid out parks, but there were a couple wonky things that we definitely wanted to tackle. So I guess the biggest priority was there's a playground that exists right in the middle here where this greenish polygon is, and that playground kind of divides the rest of the park. So the kind of beeline that you would normally take to get through the park space is broken up by a fence. And then we've heard from residents that that area is often really wet and kind of flooded. So we've added a bioretention area there to deal with some of that in a more holistic way. We did want to keep, you know, the pastoral feel of the park. We did want to add a couple more walkways, which you'll see in the black dotted lines. Some new some new trees to kind of succeed the ones that are there now, and maybe some of those are aging out. And then there's this really prominent spot over here with the green circle. It's higher up than everywhere else, but once you get up there, there's not really anything to do or look at. And we have heard from the community that there have been some misuse issues in that area as well, folks going up there and maybe drinking or loitering or whatever. So we wanted to clear out some of the underbrush, make it a little bit more visible, make it feel like a destination. And we wanted to add a pollinator meadow there so that it'd be low maintenance, beautiful, something for people to look at, something for people to do. And then they would kind of carry on throughout the rest of the park. We do want to create little gateways where people feel like they're welcomed into the space. Right now there's few signage, so you can see the purple circles throughout on the edges there. With moving that playground, you can see the fenced in dog run area in the green. That's repurposing most of that fencing there. We don't need to necessarily put dog parks everywhere, but the fencing is already intact. So this was a creative way to reuse that fencing without ripping it out. Though if it was not well received, we could do without that dog park. And then we moved the playground up to along Jacob Street here. You'll see it's fenced in as well to protect folks from running out into Jacob, but that there would be a new place for that playground out of that wet, marshy area that we've struggled with in its current location. Cragen Ave, similarly to 112th, we have two concepts for Cragen. Again, they're fairly similar, but they do function a little bit differently. I'm going to do the same thing. I'll show you concept 1 and then go into concept 2. So if you're not familiar with Craig and Ave, it's a dead end street. On the bottom right, you'll see the baseball field. This is where the Troy Little League plays. There's 2 fields. So this is the second, the smaller one that's, I think, used a little less frequently. It's also along the Troy Rail Trail, which you'll see on the top here. This is a small park space. We know that there have been issues with violence in the past, and then the park was kind of closed down. So right now it's really just a field. There's an asphalt pad that used to have basketball, but there are no basketball hoops there today. And there's a picnic table. So we wanted to kind of create a quieter, more mellow space that residents could use. 7th Ave Park is fairly close, or Geneva Pompey Park, as it's now called, is fairly close. There's a lot of activity packed into that park. Most of the residents really love that, but some folks want a place that's a little bit quieter, a place to go and sit or maybe meet a friend. We've also heard that folks might want to have like a neighborhood meeting or just have a place to bring a little one. So we wanted to create that space for them, a little bit more contemplative, a place that you could walk to and connect to the rail trail and not pack it with things like basketball or things that would be really, really intense or active. So that's basically what's here. You know, you can see the small play area for young kids. There's open play, which is really just like a grassy field. And then there's a lot of landscaped, hardscaped areas where you could have a place to set up some chairs or sit around in a circle and have a neighborhood meeting or something like that. 6th Ave Park, which is right along 6th Ave, obviously, and then tucked in behind Old 6th. This park is in a little bit of an awkward location. This is actually land owned by DOT. And obviously 6th Ave is built like a highway. So it's not really the most comfortable space. And, you know, it's a bit awkward for us to be pouring a bunch of money into something that's state-owned land. So it's a little bit tricky to find ways to make this space feel a little bit warmer. But the main priority that we wanted to do was to build a landscape buffer along 6th Ave to kind of protect that space, make it feel much safer, hopefully a little bit quieter, and then kind of sprucing up the park with general site improvements. So the yellow squares are playground surfacing areas. There are like these structures in there that you can play on now. So just making sure those are safe, making sure there's access to those. I did send this back to CHA because they haven't shown an entrance into the park. They've done a fence all the way around it. So you'll have to excuse this concept plan. They will be sending us an updated version with, you know, kind of park gateways, but there'll likely be places like over here and over here so folks can enter from the community side. Kinloch Park up on the east side. I think the name of the street is Parmenter. I think I was calling it Parameter for a little bit, but I think it's Parmenter. And then Kinloch is actually over here. And Emma Willard is right over here on the top left. Again, we have 2 concepts. So showing concept 1 now, I'm going to go through concept 2. There is or was a dog park there now. There's a fenced in area. The fence is a little damaged, and we've been there a handful of times and I haven't seen or heard of anybody using that dog park space. And it's probably because of that state and the location. We could easily remove this fencing, but we've heard from some folks in the community that they would prefer for it to be refurbished and fixed up. So we've shown that here on the concept plan, but again, we don't necessarily need to put another dog park here if, you know, that's what the community didn't want. This blue area is just a field, and right now we know that field area floods fairly consistently. Even throughout the summer months, this field has drainage issues. So that's one thing that we've really tried to focus on with our plan. And we've talked about drainage, you know, strategies, and we've also talked about adding a bioretention area, which is shown here, this circular polygon, which would be a simpler way to, or a simple way to kind of contribute to that, solving that issue. We also want to create a real park entrance and gateway, not only at the bottom on Parmenter, but also up by Kinloch, where there's we have city-owned land up here. Similarly to some of the spaces in our other parks, we've heard of misuse in the backwoods area. And we also know that if you live over here in this area, it's harder for you to get into the park. You might not go as often. There's no way to do like a loop or walk on a route where you'd be bringing your kids or your dog or whatever through this park. So we wanted to add like a wooded nature trail, another access point to the park in this corner. And then in the bottom, we really want to make it feel welcoming, like a gateway. There's right now it's like a big piece of guardrail. We want to remove that. We want to add some, more decorative elements like nice looking bollards or maybe some boulders so that people still can't drive into the space. But we would put it like a maintenance gate in for our maintenance team to get in. And then the black lines show, the walkways. On the bottom right, we have a future splash pad location. We have the associated restroom, and then we have the yellow, which would be the new location for the playground. The small square here is a pavilion. So this is kind of a similar layout to 112th with that splash pad playground combination. Postingo Gorge Park. I think most of us are familiar with this space right along Linden, just south of Congress. So you're looking at the zoomed out version, which shows 3 phases. We just up front, we did not highlight this, any amenities that we're adding into Postingo Gorge Park in our $2 million of that budget. So we're now stepping from the priority projects that we've outlined to just some of the other elements that we've been able to design through this park's money. So you'll see from the north, this is a trail that would go through the parcel that's being worked on and acquired through the ampersand deal. And then on the south, this is along Linden. Right now along Linden, obviously a really steep road. We have a lot of fast moving traffic and really no safe way for folks to get up and down. There is a guardrail there, and there's a lot of brush on the west side of that guardrail. So we want to clear out that brush and add in a paved walkway so folks have a safe way to get up and down from the park to the lower community where most people live. Zooming in on the park itself, we have these fields here where there's a pretty significant slope. So those fields aren't actively being used for things like sports or kicking a soccer ball like flatter areas in our other parks are. And they're really a maintenance burden on our team. They're sent there to mow these steep slopes, and then we have some additional erosion concerns with those slopes. So what we've proposed here is just letting that become a pollinator meadow, planting some wildflowers, and having it be more of a welcoming space for people who are going to the gorge or the park. Speaking of going to the gorge, we know that people often get to the existing overlook, and that space is in disarray and beat up, and that they can barely get a glimpse of the waterfall, and they say, wow, that looks cool. I want to go down there. Oh, and look, here's a path that, clearly a whole bunch of other people have been using. So we want to stop that overall in its tracks. It's a pretty dangerous issue. People are obviously going down to the gorge and they're getting hurt, which is very troubling and concerning. And so what we found with working with CHA is that you can actually add a new overlook further down where you can see the waterfall. You can get a really good look of it. It's not that much more work on an engineering side or a build side. And then we can create a new platform that's properly blocked off and is harder for folks to get around. The thought around this is that right now you might get there and say, wow, I can hardly see this. And I know it's something cool and attractive, and I really want to go down and check it out. The new proposal, you'd be able to actually see the waterfall. You'd get there and feel the sense of arrival. You'd say, wow, I came here, I saw it, and now I'm ready to go back home, or I'm ready to go downtown and continue on my day or go get dinner or whatever people are doing. So it would leave the mystery out of it. You'd get the experience and you'd be able to safely, hopefully, turn around. We know that we're never going to be able to prevent everybody from going down there, but we feel strongly that this is a great way to deter more people from going down there. That trail would go all the way back to the southwest side of the park. It would connect, you can see the gray dotted line hardly over here on the left, and it would connect down to that walkway that would go down Linden to Spring Ave. And then similarly, we want to do the pollinator meadow on the other side. A real key thing with these meadows too is we would address some of the grading. Right now, all the water that comes down, or not all the water, but a lot of the water that comes down on Linden and a lot of the rain that we get in the parking lot area, it goes right down onto the trail, kind of north heading this way, and it washes out that trail. So we have a lot of erosion issues there, a lot of additional maintenance burden that we're taking on with this design. And so we'd like to take that, we'd like to push it further northeast along this pollinator meadow area down to this rain garden, which would help preserve those trails, keep them safe, reduce some of the maintenance that's needed there. The next, and I think this is the last concept, is the Hudson River water lobbies. So this was identified throughout the comprehensive plan and probably a little bit earlier than that as well. A lot of the dead end roads or roads that have vacant open space on the other ends of them along our rivers, like the Post-and-Kill and the Hudson up in Lansingburg, they have publicly owned sections on where the opposite end of the road. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you look at the map, you know, a good example is this one at 122nd here. You can see 100, that's not a good example. Let's go to 120th. You can see 120th here. It extends, and this area between these two homes is actually city owned. It's public right of way. In some cases, adjacent landowners have been creeping onto that land, but it is indeed city owned. We've identified this opportunity to create water lobbies, as they've been called. These spaces have also been referred to as foot-ofs in the past. Again, just city-owned land on the opposite end of a street where it dead ends. So we'd like to create these spaces where people can get out and enjoy the waterfront. They wouldn't really function as these big parks. They'd be fairly small in size. And you'd go and there'd be a great place to look out over the water, maybe go fishing or read a book, take some photos, simple things like that. Real neighborhood amenities for the folks who live there. These likely wouldn't be these big destination points like the Post-and-Kill Gorge Park. They would really be little nooks where people could, spend time with their local friends and family, sort of thing. These concepts are fairly simple. You know, they are really plug and play. You can copy and paste one into different areas, but we did design each and every one of them. They follow a similar pattern where there'd be a little bit of landscaping, a little bit of plantings. Here, I'll zoom in on this one here so you folks can see it. So the green area is plantings. The lighter green is just a lawn restoration. So it'd just be a simple lawn area where you could lay out a blanket or something like that. The black dotted line, again, is a pathway. And then there would be, maybe a picnic table or something closer to the water with this one's calling for a water feature. So maybe that's a little bit of an elevated area. You can kind of get out and you can kind of see the Hudson River a little bit more closely. So yeah, we have each of these designed, but they do again follow a similar pattern. You know, this one, for example, has a little bit of a loop that you could do. So we also called out, this one's got an accessible fishing pier, and let's see, this one's got an informal kayak launch. So, you know, we talked to some neighbors who say, oh, we've been putting our boat in the water here for 10 years. And we said, okay, well, if you've been doing that for 10 years, you know, we'll make it so you can continue to do so. It's not going to be this encouraged space, but it would be possible. So that's the last of the concepts. Again, I'm happy to share these with you all after the call. But I would like to go into the budget. Let's see if I can navigate Zoom. Okay, you should all be able to see this spreadsheet. So the first line, you'll see the design budget, $100,000. We went through to design each and every one of these parks that you have just seen. We also added in the design guide or the standards manual that you have not seen. I can send that out once we get the responses from CHA or the edited version from CHA. So we've gone through each of those to create this kind of long-lasting vision. We have a lot of needs. We have a lot of things that need to be changed. If we were to do everything that I just went through, we would be looking at something like $10 to $12 million. Obviously, we don't have that funding secured right now for this project. And we have the 2 million. So we've gone through and identified where that 2 million should be spent. So yeah, going through this, I want everybody to kind of think about how this could be done. You know, I know when we were first going through, we were like, okay, how many playgrounds could we do? How many splash pads could we do? Could we do these like big, tangible features? Would that be a good route to take with this project? And we found that the answer was no. I mean, you would get a couple of them. You could do 5 splash pads, or you could do 10 playgrounds and then a splash pad or something like that. But really then what you'd be left with is a low performing park with one shiny object in it. And we know that it would be really, really difficult then to go back and make the spaces kind of work. It'd be really difficult for us to go back and make the parks function well. And we'd be left then in 5 or 10 years with a degrading playground that has to be replaced, much like what we have right now. So the approach that we ended up taking was we want to make great parks that need 1 or 2 more elements. So we want to do the layout. We want to create the bones and the foundation for that park. And we want to make it so that it functions really, really well. We want to make exciting new spaces. And then we want to then add stuff to it later on. So, we did, I guess I'll go through like Knickerbocker, for example. We didn't include the pool here or the parking area, but we did include the multi-use sports field, and we included the sidewalks and fencing and landscaping, things like that. So you'd be able to then go through and add in a new playground or add in a dog park later on, and you'd have this new park layout. A really good example, I guess, would be 112th Street Park, right? We have this old unused baseball field. It's this big empty space. We could go in and add in a splash pad, but then you just have a big empty space with a splash pad. You wouldn't really have like a real park. A lot of the issues that we've heard from the community too are the ways that people are interacting with one another. Maybe the 2 uses that they want to use are right up against each other. And so they feel like they're cramped or they feel like they're competing. So, redesigning the park spaces through the layout really allows us to address some of those community concerns. A big thing that we want to do throughout all the parks is address the fencing. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the parks have really tall, oppressive fencing. Gates might be left open overnight, but during the day, they've got a 10-foot fence that makes you feel like you don't belong in this space at all, and it tends to keep the parks empty, and that's certainly not what we want. Okay, so going through the parks or the budget, I guess, top to bottom, starting with Prospect Park, we did want to create a playground, as Prospect is this destination park where we know people are coming in from all over the city and even outside the city. We wanted to do some simple site improvements. The splash pad there does not have a control to turn on and off, so we wanted to add that control in to save water and money. We wanted to remove that guardrail. We wanted to add in the boulders or the decorative bollards. We wanted to address the roadway routing and do some general signage. Tree succession does not have a budget line. I'd have to get a specific item on that, but the cost is included in the site improvements. A lot of the main large shade trees in Prospect Park are degrading, so we'd like to make sure that we're creating a succession plan so that we're not without trees in the park. And then the downtown access gravel path. We know that that's going to be a really big driver for how many people can use the park. So we want to prioritize that as well. I already kind of went through Knickerbocker, but just to reiterate, we want to build that multi-use field area so that the Pop Warner football team or football league, has a place to play, and then other sports teams could come in. We did not include things like lighting. So if, maybe if teams really feel like that's necessary, we can find ways to work together to get those things and add them into the park. But we did include an irrigation system to take a little bit more of a direct approach or an efficient approach on maintenance. Again, the sidewalks, and this says TRT connection, Troy Rail Trail connection. So again, improving access into the park creating those uses that we know are going to get more people in. On the rail trail itself, we want to do the trailhead improvements to make it feel more inviting, safer, and deter ATVs. We also want to do the direct ATV barrier along the open spaces like along Winnie so that folks can't drive right in. And you'll see here that that's repurposing that guardrail from Prospect. 112th Street, we actually do have some funds from the New York State Assembly. So we'd like to use those funds to obviously install this playground. And then the general site improvements here, removing all that large fencing that goes around that old baseball field and really around the entire park, and install some new sidewalks, new fencing that makes it feel warm and inviting, some pedestrian scale lighting. Whenever we're talking about lighting throughout the park, it's really all going to be pedestrian scale. So similar to what's in Riverfront Park now or 7th Ave Park, that's smaller and it feels more appropriate, not the old Cobra head lighting, obviously. The dog park, again, is a kind of a ready-made space. So it's really just adding the fencing and those special gates, and then just some general site improvements. One thing that's important to note with this space here at 6th Ave right next to Kennedy Towers is that people do use that space now. It's not used often. Most of the space that is heavily used is in that southeast section of the park, closer up to Peoples and 8th. But some people do use this space, and we don't want to necessarily take that away from them. We want to just add a dog park in. So any bench that we are preventing access from, any real shaded area, we actually want to replace those on the perimeter, on the outside of the dog park area, so that the space does still feel whole, and those people have been using that space for years can still continue to do so. Canal Ave Park, we want to add playground equipment because that playground equipment is especially in bad shape. We also want to do the general site improvements that includes fencing, signage, and expanding out onto that section of canal. Beeman Park, again, general site improvements, removing things that are dilapidated or broken, adding in new pathways and lighting. We want to do new drainage to address that flooding concern. We want to fix up the fencing, and we want to create a point of interest at that high point, which is that pollinator meadow. Craig Ave, 6th Ave, and Kinloch, we're talking about site improvements in each of these. Again, these are kind of general improvements, doing lighting, signage, fencing, things of that nature, taking these spaces that aren't warm and inviting and making them feel like part of the community. And then in Kinloch, we added in the bioretention area as well to address that flooding, just like in Beeman. The last thing that I included was some general site improvements to our trail system. We have trails that go through the Burton Pond Preserve. We have trails that exist right now through Prospect Park, the Garnet Douglas Baltimore Trail. We're also looking at expanding the Narrows Trail down Spring Ave and connecting it through to the Stolleson Preserve along the Wynantskill. So we have a really expansive trail network right now that volunteers have been doing a great job of improving. It's really impressive what they've been able to do through either funds that they've raised themselves, contributed themselves, or maybe they've gotten a NIP grant here or there. So I've included that in our budget as a way to cap off the $2 million and expand that program to address some really serious erosion issues, and make some of the trails a little bit more safe. Okay, so I know I've done a lot of talking. I'm happy to, is it better for me to stop sharing the screen, or did you all want me to leave this up?
Let's start with if folks have specific questions about like graphics that were in the plan or particular parks, then you can share those. But yeah, we'll start with general questions.
Councilman.
Pearson.
Hold on one second. I just wanted to. James, thank you. You really gave a lot of information. I mean, a lot of information. And to digest that information that you just gave us is not something, I don't know about the other council members, but something that I could do just in a short period of time. I would really appreciate if you would send this information to all of the council members with your footnotes. So we could really spend the time to digest it. Like I said, there is so much in there that you went through. And towards the end, it looks like those are the parks that you'd be looking at to be putting the $2 million into. I only have one question that I'm only going to ask tonight. And looking at the areas of the parks that you are looking at to do, I have a concern with not touching any area off of in District 6. I know that's Colleen Ave. There's a park over there on Sheridan Ave. Because I grew up in the parks. There's a little pocket park over there that I grew up in off of Sheridan Avenue. But I know over the years, there's a lot of children on that side of that area that there is no park for them off of Colleen and Emerald Greens, an area, Sheridan Avenue, Sherman Avenue, and nothing was mentioned for that area. Is there something that's going to be looked at to go into that area for a park for the kids? I'm not looking at anything elaborate, but they could really use a park in that area.
Yeah, we did talk about Sheridan Ave Park and the space along Thompson as well. We could, potentially look at doing some site improvements over there. We did obviously prioritize Kinloch Park, which I believe is in District 6. And then the Burden.
That Kinloch Park is a totally another area. Sorry to interrupt you. It's a totally another area from where I'm talking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, we only have $2 million. And
right.
It sounds, honestly, it sounds like a lot of money, but
it's not.
Once you go through and you start making improvements, it goes super quick. So we did touch every council district, and I'd love to do more in District 6. And this is just a plan on how we should move forward, over the next 5 years, 10 years. But for the initial $2 million, I did not include anything for Sheridan Ave Park or the one on Thompson Street. It was Kinloch that needed the most attention. Again, the trails through the Burton Pond Preserve and then down closer to the Stolison Preserve, those are also in District 6. I know those are really popular amenities. Again, that
but they're not to interrupt you, they're not for children.
Well, they are used by children as well. But I understand what you're saying. You want to, the smaller improvements like we're doing at Cragen Ave or Sixth Ave Park, things like that. Again, it's just with $2 million touching all the parks, you really start to dilute the impact that you have at certain ones. So we did have to pick and choose, but we can talk more about what could happen at Sheridan Ave or along Thompson. One reason that we did not choose to spend money in Thompson is because it's really actively used as a sports complex. Right there is the South Shore Dodgers, and we know that they bring most of the traffic there. And again, that trail system is really connecting those communities. So we felt like it was more valuable to put money into something like that. But yeah, that's a great note. I appreciate that comment.
And one more thing, you mentioned Cragen again. So you mentioned that you spoke to people over in Cragen area, and I know I had people come to me in the Cragen area. Can you tell me who you're speaking to in regards to that area?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the only reason I'm asking is because I had a lot of people, the neighbors that live in that area, they don't want a park. So I'm kind of like.
Interesting. I mean, we do own that park space, and the way that it operates right now, to me is more concerning. Leaving it as is rather than, investing in it and creating a space. Off the top of my head, I can't give you the names of the folks that I spoke to directly, but I did work with Mel Bromley over at the Sanctuary for Independent Media. She was at different neighborhood events and engaging with folks through those events. One of those events was, I believe, the Geneva Pompey Park naming ceremony. And so that's where we got those really crucial comments about how that park is so active and really packed with, those more intense activities, louder activities, and how folks wanted that quieter space over at Cragen Ave. So that's how we came up with that. Looking at getting rid of it as a park, that's not something that we really considered. You know, it's tricky to obviously please
Right.
everybody in the community. Some people say they want it, some people say they don't want it. But the
Right.
reality is right now it is technically a city-owned park that just doesn't have any amenities in it. So to kind of leave it there like that didn't really sit right with me, and that's why we chose to put some investments
Right.
into it.
Because it's an isolated area. It's very, very isolated over there. So that was interesting. When you mentioned that park, I was kind of interested in where that came from. But that I'll do more of my research on that as well. But thank you. Like I said, you did a great summary of all this area. Those were just my two questions, mainly up in District 6, up in Colleen Avenue and whatnot, having a park up in that area, or doing something with the Sheridan Pocket Park over there.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you. I'd be happy to talk more about Craig and Ave Park. You know, it'd be great to hear from some of the folks that you've been talking to.
Yep.
And I understand that it is a bit of an awkward, isolated space. You know, if the Troy Little League wasn't using that second baseball field, you know, that's an opportunity we could talk about to kind of reconnect it and make that area a little bit, you know, more purposeful and useful to other folks who aren't just on that dead end street. But we also, again, added the Troy Rail Trail connection, again, with fencing to deter, you know, dirt bike use. You wouldn't actually be able to fit an ATV through there, but you would be able to walk and bike. So that would kind of speak to some of the connectivity issues of that park and maybe breathe some new life into it as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it all. Thank you.
No problem. I will also be able to share the concept plans. You know, I'll try to put as much as I can into the notes. Hopefully those concepts, the first pages of each park that I wasn't going into detail, I think that'll speak to a lot of our intention. And then if there are any questions, obviously you all are welcome to, you know, email me and we can talk about it more.
I think that'll all be very helpful. Thank you. I guess. Yeah, we'll talk about the budget aspects of it maybe at a later meeting, it sounds like. But this is a really good initial overview. And yeah, send the follow-up stuff, and I think that'll help. Let's see, are there any further questions from council members at this point? Okay, thank you, James. Good to be in the loop on everything you're thinking about here, and it looks like it's a big step forward. So thanks again.
Thanks.
Okay. And now we turn over to the discussion of the Sperry parcel and South Troy industrial development. I wanted to maybe just start with a broad overview discussion, and then we'll act on the two resolution, the resolution and the ordinance. Does that work for everybody?
I'd like to actually jump off the phone and get on my tablet. If Mara's still there, I'm going to leave this and I'm ready to come on the other one.
Okay, we should be able to.
Oops, so now I can't leave. Leave.
All right, now that he's gone. No. All right. Thank you, Steve, I can see you now.
Can you hear me now?
You can.
Good. Okay.
Okay,
So I'm sorry I'm dark here,
that's all right.
shaded. I alt tab this thing. So I just have, in case we need to bring up another screen. And now I can share the other screen.
Great.
Okay, I'm not, okay, just in case we need to, I just wanted to be able to do that. Okay. So do you want me to start the discussion, or did you want to start the discussion?
Either you can go ahead.
Okay. Again, so we, for the council members that weren't there, we took a tour of this site last week. Councilman Cummings, Steele, McDermott,
and Zalewski. Did I miss anybody? It was 4. As well as the city engineer, Todd Dickinson from the engineering department as well. So we walked the site. And again, this is about a 4-acre site approximately. I don't have the exact number, but this has been a property that the city's owned for quite some time, since the turn of the century, basically. And we have done nothing with it in 20 years. It is falling down. I think the consensus was that it would cost millions of dollars to stabilize it just to be able to do any kind of preservation of this building. The asbestos abatement on the roof, we had estimates about 1.2 million. I think they're coming in a little bit cheaper now, but there is about a $30 million oil remediation underneath there that doesn't need to occur. It's not on a consent right now. But if you're going to do any kind of development there that's other than just building a pad and doing an industrial use there, you're going to have to do the remediation there. The bigger issue here is the fact that we have a property here that is, a lot of it has already collapsed. And the time to preserve this thing, I think, was 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But right now, I think it'll be exorbitantly expensive to do so. And I requested it be transferred to the Local Development Corporation, which also owns the contiguous parcel to the west between the 2 parcels here, or at least between the 2 southern parcels here and the road. So there's some opportunity to reconfigure those. Also, at the meeting, we talked about being able to retain the riverfront or the wine and skill portion of this parcel. It turns out the wine and skill portion of the parcel is owned by the Local Development Corporation. So that's a benefit and a negative there. The good thing about that is the city doesn't have to worry about selling or giving away property that's on a riverfront or a creek. However, we all recognize that there would be some benefit for the city to retain ownership or control of that southern piece so that it not only could serve the needs of the city for storage of salt and other materials, but also that it could provide adequate parking for eventual access to a greenway there. And obviously there's a lot of obstacles, including a railroad and Route 4 that you need to get through to connect up to the rest of the trail network up there. But there is an opportunity there. So obviously we would want to retain that portion for city and public use as well. What else did I have to say about that? But again, I think it's time that we have a potential purchaser of the property. And again, I don't think it's going to be something that you're going to be able to preserve the building. I don't think. I've talked with a developer about a different developer about the economics of doing the remediation and preserving the building, and they're really not there given the scope of the remediation that's required. So
just for my knowledge, can you talk about what that remediation, how would a developer go about doing that? Are there state funds available to cover some portion of that, or is it just?
There are no state funds. It's not a Superfund site, and again, super site funding is limited in its availability. There are tax credits available, but they have been clamped down, and I don't know the specifics of them because I haven't really used them. But there was a lot of clamping down on how much the tax credits could be issued because they were getting abused down in New York City, where land costs are a lot higher, and you'd get like a half-acre site to redevelop and put a multi-story building on top of it, and the rents are obviously higher there, but they were maxing out the available credits. So I can't give you the specifics on how the tax credit program works, but just in speaking to Andrew Kretschik in my office, he doesn't think that it's likely that there's much credit there that's going to support the $30 million in oil in remediation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to the liability under this proposal of that remediation? Does that transfer to the LDC, or does it just sit there? Does it stay on the city to some extent?
Well, it's going to stay on the city. The city is in the chain of title for the remediation. So as long as you have a developer that does something that doesn't require the remediation, I think that takes us off the hook. It puts the LDC in the chain as well. But in the end, if you sell it to a developer who defaults or even starts to remediate it and can't finish, or it could potentially come back, or if if DEC came back and said, look, you got to clean this up, which right now they wouldn't do, it would, I'm sure some portion of that liability would come back to the city.
Okay.
I'm more thinking about the liability of the actual structure, so that we don't have another Leonard Hospital incident here, for a property that's in serious, very poor condition.
And what is the status of negotiations with potential buyer? Do you know whether they're interested in just demolishing the whole thing? Has there been any discussion about stabilizing anything in those discussions at this point?
There never has been any discussion about stabilizing. I haven't really, we've talked loosely around this proposal, but I haven't gotten too deep into it because, well, it's still city owned. And yes, I wear two hats and I could negotiate that. But if the city's going to sell it, it's going to go out to an RFP. And we haven't gotten beyond that, other than the cost of trying to bring down the cost of the demolition.
So what would be, I am slightly concerned about these mechanisms around transferring and especially given how far we are under with potential negotiations. What would it take to just do an RFP? I think it could be helpful to just have an opportunity for other interested parties to hear. What would it take to go through the RFP process versus the LDC process?
Well, I'd have to create an RFP, just like I did with Monument Square, publish it, put it out there for the public. You're going to get, it's just a timing issue, and it's another thing to do. And it's taken some time to even get to the Sperry building, given all the other priorities that are ahead of it.
Yeah.
Chair?
Yeah, Councilman Gully.
Steve, a couple questions on that $35 million remediation. If a company were to come in there and take that building down and just put a slab over the top of it, would that remediation still be a necessity, or could they bypass that by blacktopping and concreting over the top of the land?
So they certainly would be able to bypass it. There would have to be discussions with the Department of Environmental Conservation regarding this. If you're going to build a 2-story building, you're going to be excavating, you're going to be going down and doing footings, you're more likely to impact the oil that's there. The oil's anywhere from 10 to 20 feet deep. That was a huge tank. I can't remember the number of how many millions of gallons it held, but it was a huge tank that was leaking for some time. And that was obviously, I believe, before we got it. Obviously it was before we got it. But so it depends. A slab is usually something you can get away with. You're going to have minimal excavation. You're not going to be going down and putting footings in. So for the city to be able to do something there on the retained portion of it, to put up a storage shed, that should be easily accomplished.
And I noticed that in your information, you say the LDC has potential purchasers lined up for this site. Is there anything that is strong enough there that you could bring to the council that might say, hey, look at this package, maybe we shouldn't RFP and maybe we should move in this direction?
Well, I basically right now have one potential purchaser of the property, and it's really to offset, the industrial access road and the fact that we're dislocating or relocating a portion of their use of the property up there on Madison Avenue. So, that's basically what it is. This area has always been, through all the studies done, it is for heavy industrial use. That was in the comprehensive plan and all the studies, the South Troy brownfield studies prior to that, was to make that area industrial use because of the contamination down there.
The last couple of years, I've been hoping that would turn into a very unique industrial park that would give us a waterway access for distribution and maybe some traveling. Do you think that going to an RFP on that property would be the best bet to try to maybe package that up with the other land around it to make one big project out of it? Or do you think,
well, so there's multiple different ownerships. So the local development corporation owns the King Fuels land to the south of this property. And so that remediation is starting in February with National Grid. And the LDC will be looking to try and sell that property for more of an industrial use, including water access. So there's potentials for that property. And then the LDC owns that little piece of 4 acres north of the Wine and Skill. Thank you. So as you're looking at it right there, the LDC owns the dirt area there and the green area, much of, but not all of the green area above Kings Road. And then the LDC owns everything to the right of the Wine and Skill, with the exception of at the lower left of the picture you had there. Okay, so stop there for 1 sec. We don't own, that's the line, right? That's a Chevron property. And then to the left of that is King Fuels property. And at the lower left, to the left of those silos, National Grid has their gas regulator station there. And, there's a pipe that goes across the river as well. So we're looking at the LDC is looking at trying to sell that property and be able to do a better industrial development there, although some of that will likely include the relocation of the salt pile.
Michael Barrett
Basically,
expressed some information about the historical value of that site. How do we stand with that? I mean, is that something that, where do we stand with that in your eyes?
Well, again, to be able to, I think what you need to do is document the structure that's there. It's no different really than when Schenectady tore down the Alco plant to make the casino. You go in, you document the artifacts that are there, you take photos, you provide interpretation as, for whatever gets facilitated there or at another location as well. I mean, saving that building, the only portion of that building that's really salvageable is what you're looking at there, the T there. You can see the roof as the roof heads to the right where it changes. Anything's preservable with the right amount of money. But you're talking, you're 20 million, I don't know, I'm making up numbers. But preserving that, you go inside. First, you have to stabilize the building to be able to even remove and remediate the roof, which has asbestos on it as well. And that, you got to do a section at a time. And in order to do that, you're going to be putting cinder block up, and you're going to lose a lot of the historic integrity of the building. And so as far as what I don't have, and the deputy mayor Krzyzewski can tell you, she met with the Sperry family and the Bird and Iron Works Museum as well. And they talked about this 8 years ago, and nobody wanted to do anything then. And it's only gotten worse since then.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Chair,
Yes, Councilman Steele.
I just wanted to add, Jim, that Michael did walk us around the building. So we had the historical context. And yes, the history was interesting, but that history could still be preserved in an exhibit, a model of the building. There are many ways that it could be creatively conveyed without necessarily preserving this entire building. It is in terrible shape, and it's been used as a canvas for graffiti. I can't even imagine what would be involved in the amount of money But I think the historical value, the story behind it could certainly be conveyed. It's a tragedy. It hasn't been dealt with, but it should have been done 50 years ago. I don't even give it 20.
And I'll just add to that, the documented photos that already exist that Bird and Ironworks have are probably, there's great photos that Michael even showed us that are probably even better interpretation material than photographs of this building falling down right now. But
Chair.
And I also didn't even feel safe having us in certain sections of that building.
Yes, Councilman Gully.
Councilwoman Steele, I want to thank you because that's exactly the explanation I was thinking, that, sometimes even though something has a historical or archaeological value, we really have to look at what we do to make it better for the city and we move forward rather than stay in a stagnant point. I believe that certain documentation and maybe like a certain information and education through a kiosk or some type of plan will be a lot better than just keeping an old building around that wouldn't do the city any good. I think that ranges out on many different projects.
If I could, I would also add that, part of the long-term plan for Troy is to build the 7.5-mile riverfront trail. So there's plenty of room for interpretation on a riverfront or river proximate trail, however that winds its way through all of these parcels.
Steve, I haven't seen any details on the contamination. Do you have an actual study that shows like where the test wells were done? And I know I saw
we have a full study done that I can make available to the city council.
That would be helpful. Do you know off the top of your head, is it the entire site or is it mostly on the south side of the site?
I believe it's mostly on the west side of the site in front of the building. I mean, the building's been there for a while and I think there was pipelines running through there and there was a large tank probably in that area in the front of it. So it's mostly on the west of the building.
It's not necessarily under the building itself, but it's the area to the.
Well, I don't know where it migrated to, but I could get you the report and share that with you. But it's significant, and
Okay.
It was and the 30 million. It's a $30 million estimate. I misspoke previously. I said 35. I think it's roughly a $30 million estimate, and that's from 10 years ago.
Right. Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen again for a second there. So again, you're not having the details, but if you send that, that's great. If we assume that this area is contaminated, that's the area you're talking about, right?
Yeah, that area. And there was a pipe running along there. It's probably even under Kings Road. So, it's all over there. It's fairly deep, but
so
again,
from a remediation standpoint, and I haven't done this. So, what would the DEC say if it's not contaminated under the building itself? What would they say about, you finished demolishing the building that's falling down and this part of the building that's falling down, and then you put a slab across that and a slab here, and then build flex space kind of, steel construction office mixed use space.
I think you need to really see the report and get the extent of where the contamination is.
But I guess the core question there is, do you have to do the remediation here to have a parking lot for an office park here if it's not actually contaminated under where you're digging the footings, or is it?
My understanding, Anasha, is that you only have to mitigate what you disturb. So if you're not disturbing unless there's a consent order or some other order requiring the remediation of the entire site, you only have to remediate the soils that you're removing from the site or soils that are disturbed but to remain on the site.
Okay.
My experience, we've been able to cap certain areas. You can delineate areas with certain types of fabric and then fill over them. Requirements vary greatly by the site, but generally speaking, if you don't touch the contaminated soils, you don't have to remediate it unless there's some other overarching order.
Okay, thank you.
And again, it depends. Yeah, it depends on what you're constructing, how deep you have to go for footings. There's a lot of variables.
Of course. So yeah, if you can send us that report, I think that would be really helpful before the next meeting. And then, yeah, I mean, so the core thing for me is walking through it. Yeah, a lot of the building is pretty scary. But as you mentioned, this T part, which is the most historic part, seems like a creative architect could do some really cool reuse of it, of those walls, and be able to tell that story. I know how much developers like to tell stories about the place that they are. And I'm concerned more broadly and economically about the idea of pushing these uses that have been a real detriment to the South Central neighborhood for years. And just as we finally have the development interest in that area, seems like we're really putting a lot of effort into trying to maintain those detrimental uses in Troy, when we have site control here and could be looking to leapfrog it a little bit, and have development happening in both of these places.
Well, and again, we're looking at, in order to get that development up there in the north, you're going to want to do some relocation of uses that are up there. So they're not going to just go away just because the industrial road is there taking some of their property. They are going to remain there unless we accommodate them in another location to be able to move to.
I mean, if there's actual development interest in building here, this is a beautiful waterfront site, and I think it's on them to find a place that's economical and makes sense for them to operate. If to just sacrifice a whole other area of Troy for another generation.
Well, and I can't make somebody move if they're not going to move unless
No.
I have something to offer them.
And I don't think that that's your job alone. Obviously, if you do what you can to create the conditions for that, but that's a deal that would happen between private parties, right? If we build a nice road here and this is developable now, it's up to them to decide, is it worth more to them as selling it to someone to develop, or is it worth more to them to continue to operate their current operations there? My sense is that
and what the comprehensive plan has talked about is residential and mixed use north of the posting kill, and more of this flex space south of the posting kill to the jail, and then heavy industrial south of the jail. And that's what we're looking to do here. And again, you have an industrial working waterfront use potentially down there in the King Fuels area. I mean, it's a shame that our working waterfront area where the seawall is in an area that it's contiguous to downtown, and we'd like to see something more compatible with the uses in that area. So the unfortunate thing is you're relocating out of there and you're moving to a location that's going to need some infrastructure investment to be able to be working waterfront and have riverfront access. But that's the route we're going with the King Fuels property. And again, the site south of Skolite, it has offices in there. It has a lot of vehicle storage there, and it has a maintenance facility in there as well. You're basically relocating parking because you're going to lose that northern bay or that eastern bay on Madison Street of that building. So the one closest to the railroad, that one section is going to be coming down. The road's going to run through there, and you're losing a lot of the vehicle parking there. And again, and we've been calling it the industrial road forever. I always say it's probably going to be less of an industrial road because it's got so much mixed use potential north of Madison Avenue and north of the posting kill. But it's it's not increasing by relocating those vehicles down south. It's not creating any additional traffic. It is, you know, and it's a use there that in the future, after the building gets torn down for us, and somebody uses it, then that is, you know, the next potential development of land down there. We can't do it all at once. I think we need to start and build off your strengths, start around the downtown area and work our way south.
So what happens if we build the portion 2 of the industrial road? Does it go from Adams?
It's River Street, basically. Yeah, it goes from Adams south. It's basically a River Street continuation.
So it includes a bridge extension here, is that correct?
There's a bridge, yeah, there's a bridge extension across the Posting Hill.
And it's a portion of
across the Skolite property. Right, so the rails remain for now.
What if it ends here for now? What does that do to the funding and to its impact?
If it ends where?
At Madison. What if portion 2 goes from Adams to Madison?
Well, why would you do that? Then you have a discontinuous industrial access road that doesn't even benefit anybody in South Troy. We would lose our funding, I'm sure. We already broke this into 2 phases to be able to get the first part built and show that we were making some progress, so that the second phase wasn't stripped, or the additional funding wasn't stripped from us, because everything north of Monroe Street was the difficult portion to do. The acquisition there between the salt pile and the Bruno manufacturing building. So I can't imagine them letting us split it out into a third, especially with no plan. And again, why would you just want to get this done and make it this road that will benefit all future development, including that site, the Skolite site, and everything north of there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if it's not an industrial road anymore,
well, it is still an industrial road, though. It's still, you know, there's trucks down there. There's sites down there north of the jail we don't control. There's industrial properties south in King Fuels. There's going to be industry down there. Yeah. So it will have industrial usage.
Okay, I see. All right, so back to the core parcel at hand here. Yeah, I guess it's the details that we need for now. And then,
well, regardless, I can get you that. Regardless, transferring it to the LDC gives the LDC the ability to negotiate. And if you want me to, you know, reach out additionally and look for other, you know, after we analyze a little bit better where the contamination is.
Yeah.
But again, from relying on my expert, the contamination is with the property, and it's gonna prohibit development there.
Yeah, no, and I think the LDC is probably the right organization to shop this around a little bit, and I think, you know, the proposed solution could work for a time. Have you talked at all about limiting the length of that lease? Is that something you'd be comfortable putting in this agreement? How would that function?
I wouldn't be comfortable putting that into this agreement. I mean, I want to transfer the property. It may be, I don't see someone doing the investment for a lease. It's regardless of if it's a reuse of the property totally, or somebody's going to save the building and save the building, or tear it down and put flex space, or tear it down and pave it for parking. Nobody's going to lease that space. It's a pretty significant investment.
Would you be comfortable? Is there a mechanism to put it out that doesn't require everything that you're talking about in terms of RFP, or do you have formats that would make that relatively easy to? I mean, obviously not. It's another project, but to put it out to at least give people an opportunity to propose on it?
I would be happy to reach out to developers independently and ask. I mean, I've reached out to one already. I reached out to one that was not interested for any kind of redevelopment. I'll be happy to reach out to a few more.
Okay.
but
That would be helpful. Really, yeah, I mean, to get a sense of, I guess before you do that, we should just get a clear sense of exactly where the liability is and whether that remediation liability could be avoided by a reconstruction, adaptive reuse building. The city of Troy over and over has been demolishing its history. And if there's anything we can do to save a bit of it, I think it's worth trying. I understand that it's hard, but having been in it,
you saw there, most of the supports that were still there were under the weights of the beams. So the beams were holding them in.
Yeah, you're talking about the further up portion here, but in the most historic section, if you could save this and this, and then build onto it, this would be a great site to develop. You could build a parking lot over the brownfield, and I wish I had millions of dollars to develop such things, but in absence of that, I think it's at least worth reaching out to a few folks, because again, this is very close to Albany. It's a good central location in the capital region, and I think we should be thinking about it in a little bit of a higher and best use than as a parking lot, if at all possible.
Well, and again, a parking lot might be a good short-term methodology to get the demolition and the liability off the city's hands. There, I'm sure, will be some construction there. It'll be lighter in use, but it's always, it's not the type of investment that's going to prohibit this from being sold in the future. And, at some point here, when this bridge gets redeveloped, when the Menands Bridge gets redeveloped, then there will be probably a better access down there that doesn't bring the trucks and vehicles through off of Route 4 and through the downtown to Main Street. So I just think that at some point in the future, this is a good commercial location. And yes, it could be flex, it could be industrial, but just given its location, given it being south of the jail, given it being adjacent to the tracks there and next to county waste, I think the best use there, as is in the comprehensive plan, is industrial uses down in that location.
Okay.
And I can certainly, we could even, obviously I'll work towards whatever you want to work towards. I can do that through the LDC, or I can do that through the city.
Yep.
I just think, let's get the ball moving on this and transfer it so we can get through to the negotiation, whoever it may be with, to get this property back into at least some sort of productive use and out of it being a liability.
Yeah.
So it generated no taxes in 21 years.
What would it take? I don't know if this is a question for Aaron or Steve. What would it take to find out what it would actually take to stabilize this end building, or the T section?
All yours, Aaron.
Structural evaluation. We would just have a structural engineer go through, document the deficiencies. You'd outline what you'd expect to use the building for. So obviously, stabilizing it and renovating it for habitable space is different than what the building was designed for. This was, essentially a warehouse, a manufacturing, facility. It wasn't designed to be a heated, habitable space necessarily. So that would sort of be in addition to the stabilization efforts.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, a reuse of this building as is, it's not a clear span high bay use. I think your restoration of that building is going to have limited appeal. It's certainly not going to be residential. There is much better space anywhere else than what you're going to end up with being renovated. If this was a big old warehouse that was, was clear span and had high bays, I think you'd be in a much better position.
Yeah. I guess what I'm wondering here is, what would the cost of that analysis be? And could we look at, maintaining in city hands this T, and I know we own the lot next to it for our use, giving everything up to,
And then just so everybody's clear, we don't own the entire lot next to it, right?
no, we
So-
just don't, we own about the size of the building next to it
Right,
again.
right. I just want to make sure everyone understood that.
So if that was maintained for city use, again, only if it's financially viable to stabilize it. But then it at least we get, I think it's true. The rest of this is the much bigger liability. And we do need some storage kind of space. So if we can get the rest of the larger liability portion demolished and trucked away, and used as truck parking for a while, but maintain ownership on both sides, then we get to be part of the conversation longer term.
You want to maintain a piece of property then, so
I mean, really, I'd like to shop it to someone to do a really cool creative reuse, but it sounds like that's
I think it's an extremely heavy lift. I mean, I've been asked about this property before. Developers have people on out there looking for opportunities, and I've never had anybody reach out to me on the Sperry property. I've had people reach out to me on the King Fields property, but never on this property. And I think there's a reason why.
okay. Well, let's. So you're going to talk to a few folks at least, get some confirmation of that lack of interest, and then I guess I didn't get a clear answer or got a clear answer on the first half from Aaron, but is he still on?
Yeah, it's probably.
Do you have a sense of what that structural analysis study what kind of funding would be necessary?
It all depends on the level you're looking for. If you're looking for a ballpark, it's just, you spend more. Do you want construction drawings on what needs to, happen to go out to bid to stabilize it? Or do you want a rough feeling of what it's going to take? Because, I can give you a ballpark figure based on just my walkthrough, but, I'm assuming you want to spend a couple of $1,000s and have somebody go through it and provide, a certain level of detail, but certainly not, construction documents, right?
Exactly. Get us basically.
There you go, a couple $1,000s.
A clear answer on whether or not it's possible to stabilize that for city use.
There's no need to spend any money. It is possible to stabilize that building for city use.
And it would cost us.
That's not the question. Your question is how much will it cost? And is it cost effective to do so, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And I can also answer that. And the answer to that question would be no. But that's your point is you want to save a historic building. And so it's obviously not going to be the cheapest way for us to get that amount of space, right? We could build a new warehouse, demolish that and build a new warehouse with the same square footage for less than it would cost to stabilize that building.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like the shopping it around is the most viable, if that. And then yeah. Do other council members have questions? Okay, going once. Oh, Councilmember Steele, did you have?
Well, I was going to suggest that we move forward and move this out of committee for council consideration based on the information that we're going to be getting.
Okay. All right, so we're just requesting the existing study that's already been done on with the test site wells, and some informal conversations with a couple more developers to confirm lack of interest. And then and I guess if you can get an answer from potential buyers, whether they would have any interest in stabilization of at least a portion of it, and whether they're still interested in the project. And then,
Chair, Councilwoman Steele, are you making a motion to move this out of committee?
I was.
Okay. Chair, I'll second her motion to move it out of committee into the full council.
Okay, it's not on the floor yet, but we will make a motion to put it on the floor in a minute. I'm not going to delay you any further. But I just want to make sure everything I said. Is there anything else anyone wanted from Steve before our next meeting? Okay. Then we will entertain a motion. I got to take the resolution first.
Yeah.
And I have to pull it up. I've been flying all over the place on this. All right. So we will take a motion on resolution 65. Resolution determining that proposed unlisted action shall have no significant adverse impacts on the environment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Steele. And do I have a second?
Second.
Very good. Councilmember Ash McPherson seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We will now take a motion on the ordinance 74. Ordinance
Just say that resolution 65 passes for the ayes, 0 noes.
Oh yeah,
Thank
thank you. 3 ayes, 0 noes. And we will now take a motion on ordinance 74, ordinance authorizing and directing the transfer of parcels to the Troy Local Development Corporation. Council President Mantello, motion.
I so move.
Very good. Motion by Councilmember Steele. Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, council members. We will. Oh,
Sorry,
yep,
just
one
for the
more.
record, ordinance 74 passes, 3 ayes, 0 noes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. Yes.
Councilman, I just want to mention one other thing, totally unrelated, if we're done with this one,
Yes.
is that we will be doing a single test pit in Riverfront Park parking lot. So not in the park, but in the parking lot to determine the feasibility of doing geothermal heating and cooling from there. So if there will be a drill probably in there at the southernmost end of the parking lot, either towards the end of this week or the beginning of next week. They'll be going down 560 feet. They'll be basically putting pipes in there to see if it doesn't, it'll be there when it's no longer, if it doesn't work, or even if it's not, whatever, if it doesn't, it's not something that will impact the park area. I just want you to know that that's what's going on in there. So there won't be any above ground remnants of it after the work is done, other than for the testing period for a few weeks. So I just wanted you guys aware of that.
Thank you.
I wanted the council to be aware of that. Sorry, I'm gonna watch my language there.
Very good. Thank you all. Any further notes before we adjourn?
I just want to thank the staff for all their work and time on all items tonight.
Indeed.
And if there's no other comments, I would move to adjourn.
All right, I'll take a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks again, everybody.
Thank
See you next week.